What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom previews did go live as expected, and there was a ton of information getting out there that just got the internet completely hyped, and there's a lot of stuff to pull from these different previews, and we'll go over some of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a shocking announcement and decision from the CMA to block the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition, the fallout from it, and even the responses from Microsoft and Activision themselves. And we'll also be talking about some pretty cool stuff for Final Fantasy fans who are excited for that Final Fantasy 16 release. Looks like there's probably going to be more stuff for you to buy. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with PlayStation Plus games for the month of May. This will be for the Essentials tier, which is that $60 per year tier where you get a couple of games every month that, as long as you claim, will just be part of your library going forward as long as you're a subscriber. Let's take a look here. This over on PlayStation Blog. These leaked out a few hours ahead of time, and then Sony just, I guess, was like, hey, just go ahead and post it to the blog. But these will be available May 2nd. Very important, by the way, if you have not claimed the current PlayStation Plus games, you might as well add them to your library, even if you're not going to play them now. Who knows, maybe someday you will, and again, it's part of your subscription service, so may as well do that. But May 2nd, we will have Grid Legends, that's on the PS4, PS5, Chivalry 2 on the PS4 and the PS5, and then Descenders on the PS4. I haven't really played Descenders, but I do see a lot of people mention that it's a good game, so let me know if I should check that out. Kind of the same with Chivalry 2, but I will say Grid Legends is actually a pretty cool game. This is the game where they try to do more of a intertwined narrative with actual cutscenes and stuff in the game. And visually speaking, it already looked good, but it was kind of interesting to see them take a shot at it. I just don't know if it did as well as they were hoping necessarily. But I mean, here it is now, part of PlayStation Plus. I think worth at least claiming and checking out, especially if you're a racing fan. But not too bad of a month here for PlayStation Plus in May. I think the standout, though, would be Grid Legends. Also, we did have an exhibitor announced for Gamescom that got people pretty interested, kind of excited as well. We can see this posted up over on Twitter saying they're excited to announce that Nintendo will be exhibiting at Gamescom 2023. Many more exhibitors will follow in the coming weeks. Stay tuned. Of course, this being August 23rd to the 27th. And this got people wondering, well, what are they going to show up with exactly? They'll have a physical booth there, a presence. They're going to advertise something. Well, I mean, they could advertise games that are already out. Like, they could still be making the rounds, this tour for Tears of the Kingdom with demo stations to get people playing it. Pikmin, that'll be still fresh on people's minds at that point. But we also assume they will have some sort of event over the summer, probably in June or around when we would have had E3, just to set up the second half of 2023 and then probably also work into 2024. So I assume they will have new stuff that we don't know about yet to showcase at Gamescom. But either way, good to see Nintendo still making it out to some of these in-person live events, especially after what happened with E3. There's still kind of a concern around live events existing going forward, but at least for now, it looks like Nintendo will be at Gamescom later this year. Oh, and if you've been a fan of the Lego Super Mario series, it looks like there are going to be some more figures to pick up, which we can see this over on the Lego Twitter account, saying we can't wait to show you the new additions to the world of Lego Super Mario. Nice little video here teasing it. And yes, it looks like it's a bunch of figures from the Donkey Kong series. So they had Donkey Kong in there, they had Diddy Kong, Dixie Kong, Cranky Kong, and a couple of others. And I mean, it makes sense, especially with the success of the Super Mario movie and Donkey Kong being so prominently featured in it, and obviously Nintendo and Lego working hand in hand right now, and I assume the Lego series for Super Mario has been incredibly popular. I would still like to see them try something with a Metroid or a Zelda, just to see what they can come up with there. But we see the teaser now. I would expect an official announcement for the Donkey Kong Lego figures probably to happen the next couple of days, maybe next week at the latest. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Hard to believe we're almost 2 weeks away from release. It feels like we've been building up to May 12th for a long time. I mean, really, it's the sequel The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild kind of feels like we've been building up to this for the entire Switch generation, so it's no shocker that this is a massive amount of hype building behind it. And then after the previews yesterday, just went to another level. And I'm going to go over some of the details here, but there's still so much more to learn from these different videos as they were going live all over the place with all these different write-ups, as Nintendo had people come out and demo The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom for about an hour or so, and it was in a very controlled environment, I'll say. We'll get to more of that later, but I would definitely check out Skill Up. He had a good video on it. Zeltic, obviously with their knowledge of it, you definitely want to check out Zeltic there. And then Nintendo Life also had a section of gameplay with no commentary over it. So if you're just gonna hear, I guess, the ambiance of the world as they're running around and doing different things in it, check that one out too. But to start, visually speaking, it looks much sharper than Breath of the Wild. I've been playing through Breath of the Wild again, so it is fresh on my mind right now. And even through the compression of YouTube, you can see it definitely looks better than what we were dealing with for Breath of the Wild. Unfortunately, the frame rate in this build anyway, kind of sketchy at times, and that does concern me for a game like this that's action-adventure, if that could affect certain things. But again, we'll see after the game releases, then I'm sure a subsequent 1, 2, or even 3 gigabyte day one patch hits. But otherwise, the puzzles, extremely open-ended. That seemed to be the focus here of this demo, was to just give you a good chunk of your abilities right off the bat and go out there and try to solve different puzzles on these sky islands. In fact, from what I could see, that's where most of the footage was from. So I don't necessarily think a lot of the time was spent on the ground level. And that kind of makes sense because they can have it a bit more controlled and set you up with different puzzles to solve with Ultra Hand or Fuse or any of those sorts of things. And in fact, they were on full display here in some pretty interesting ways. I even saw some mention that they were able to pick up different enemies because their backpack was able to be grabbed, say, by Ultra Hand, and they were able to solve different puzzles that way, or be able to rewind different obstacles or things coming down a cliff at them to throw it back at the enemy. There's a lot going on here, especially with that physics engine. The weapons themselves, when you fuse with different things around you in the environment, it appears it's only kind of like a one-time thing. Like if you fuse a sword and something on the ground with like a mushroom or something, you can only do that once. You can't then just keep fusing stuff to it necessarily, which means that the overall issue that we had with, or at least I had and others had with Breath of the Wild and your weapons just degrading over time, isn't necessarily solved as much as I was hoping. So you're still going to run into your weapons breaking quite a bit as you play through the game. The controls also being brought up as there just being a lot going on. You going through menus consistently to attach different things together and call up different ingredients and stuff. So it's going to take a bit of getting used to with the different controls. And you do get a medallion. So if you want to experiment, maybe at certain parts of the world, and you're concerned about falling off of a sky island or losing your place, dropping that medallion means you can travel back to that point at any time. I also want to point out in Nintendo Life's gameplay, they're walking around, they come up to a sign that mentions building a home. I know that's been theorized and people have hoped that that would be a thing in Tears of the Kingdom where you just kind of build your own house. So we'll keep an eye for that one to see if that is a big thing, especially as we get closer to reviews. Now, the other question that's come up has to do with dungeons, and Gene Park, and I believe Brian Altano also backed him up on this, mentioned that as he was going through, he had a portion where he unlocked what appeared to be a dungeon or a shrine of some kind. He looked in there, but he couldn't go into the actual area, as a Nintendo rep told him to turn around. Basically, you're not allowed to go that far into the game. So I don't know. I'm still curious about the structure of the game itself. And well, IGN Japan got tagged by Nintendo, and they showed a bit too much. They were outside of the embargo walls, we'll say. Videos were pulled down, and they detailed things like auto build and even some spoiler territory stuff that I'll leave up to the Tears of the Kingdom subreddit to discuss and potentially spoil you with. But auto build was shown in great detail. Actually, it's part of your ability wheel, and let's say you have some sort of concoction that you've made, and there was a lot going on there, where there's just these different fans all over the place, or things set up in a certain way with rockets. you can save that configuration and recall it at different times with auto build. So it seems like Nintendo ran into probably some different things through QA, focus group testing, and others to work out some of these quality of life things ahead of time. And it's great to hear. And overall, yes, Tears of the Kingdom is looking really, really good. And I'm excited to get my hands on it, but we'll probably be hearing about this game, obviously, with reviews potentially 3 or 4 days ahead of time for that release. Like, I think Nintendo is probably going to have these review codes out either by this weekend or to start off next week. So things are getting exciting here for Zelda fans. And from what we've seen, whether it's through the final trailer or these previews, it's looking pretty good over there with Tears of the Kingdom. Next up, let's talk about a shocking announcement and decision that was announced yesterday, and this comes from the CMA, who we know has come up quite a bit when it comes to the Microsoft Activision Blizzard deal, as they have been a thorn in Microsoft's side this entire way, with Sony kind of egging them on. And what was expected to be an announcement that they had approved the deal actually flipped on its head, and they're blocking it. We can see this posted up over on their website saying Microsoft Activision deal prevented to protect innovation and choice in cloud gaming. And this is interesting because this entire way, the thought process has been about Call of Duty and Sony, and instead it turned into their concerns around cloud gaming and innovation in the UK, and Microsoft potentially gaining a stranglehold around that entire sector because of Activision Blizzard. Now, after this was posted up, there were responses all over the place. I discussed some of this in more detail when it comes to the deal being blocked on the second channel, so check that out if you want to see more of the details around it. But I was curious, especially when it comes to Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard, even some of their partners who would respond to this, and they sure did. Lulu Cheng, for example, who's been quite involved when it comes to the social media side of things with this deal, says the CMA's report today is a major setback for the UK's ambitions to be a tech hub and will work with Microsoft to reverse it on appeal. This report is also a disservice to UK citizens who face increasingly dire economic prospects, and we will need to reassess our growth strategy in the UK. Global innovators, large and small, will take note that despite all its rhetoric, the UK is closed for business. That's again from the EVP Corporate Affairs and CCO Activision Blizzard. Now, Brad Smith also responded as expected. He's the vice chair and president at Microsoft, who says, "We remain fully committed to this acquisition and will appeal. The CMA's decision rejects a pragmatic path to address competition concerns and discourages technology innovation and investment in the United Kingdom. We have already signed contracts to make Activision Blizzard's popular games available on 150 million more devices. We remain committed to reinforcing these agreements through regulatory remedies. We're especially disappointed that after lengthy deliberations, this decision appears to reflect a flawed understanding of this market and the way the relevant cloud technology actually works." Now, I had mentioned some of the partners they made agreements with also responding, which includes Boosteroid, who I have to imagine they were just kind of happy to be there, but they are a cloud gaming platform. They say Boosteroid team and our users disagree with the CMA's decision against Microsoft's purchase of Activision. Our position on this issue is in line with that of Microsoft's president, Brad Smith. We hope for a quick resolution to this question. And yeah, I assume Boosteroid, Nvidia, even I guess technically Nintendo, like other companies that they've signed these deals with, probably would prefer it to go through at this point because they have the deal inked for 10 years of Call of Duty or even Activision Blizzard games just on their platforms that they might not have if this deal does not go through. Now, all of this brings us to Bobby Kotick, who did his own response this way of an internal email that of course just got out there online saying this isn't the news we wanted, but it is far from the final word on this deal. Alongside Microsoft, we can and will contest this decision, and we've already begun the work to appeal to the UK Competition Appeals Tribunal. We're confident in our case because the facts are on our side. This deal is good for competition. So as we've gone through these responses, you've probably seen it come up a couple of times. Yes, Microsoft is saying they will appeal this decision with the CMA. Based on history, though, success rate not really on their side when it comes to this, as the CMA is pretty tough when it comes to this kind of thing. And the biggest part now to look forward to would be the EU's decision, and that's going to happen before the end of May, if I remember correctly. And if the EU goes to block this deal as well and kind of falls in line with what the CMA is doing, and we see the FTC kind of siding with them as well, with the regulatory bodies here with the CMA and the EU, that might actually be it for the deal. I don't really know how Microsoft fights all these larger regulatory bodies and wins against all of them for this deal, and if it's worth it, because while we've been talking about their June 30th deadline, they would have to extend it significantly. Some analysts have talked about this going on for years. One mentioned 2 to 3 years. Can you imagine us still talking about this Microsoft Activision deal in like 2025 or 2026? It's just never going to end. But to me, there's no good way to look at this. It was a devastating blow to Microsoft and their ambitions to acquire Activision Blizzard. Not really sure what goes from here necessarily, as it seems like every step of the way there's been some crazy twist, with this one being the most recent, as people were going to bed the other night thinking it would be approved in the morning, and then they all woke up to it being just outright blocked by the CMA. So now, as I mentioned, looking forward to next month to see what the EU decides, and if they go to block it, I will tell you this, Microsoft, they're going to be okay. Obviously, they'll just move on. They have to pay $3 billion, I believe, to Activision Blizzard. Activision Blizzard, though, this is going to hurt them pretty bad. Their stock price already plummeted. I'm curious what happens if Microsoft decides to move on for Activision Blizzard's sake and where they end up. But there we are right now with the CMA actually blocking the deal. Microsoft and others, Activision, looking to appeal. We'll see what happens next month with the EU. Next up, let's talk about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. It is out tomorrow. I am really excited for this game, especially after reviews started going live. And yeah, it turns out it's quite a bit better than the first one, Fallen Order. We can see this post up over on Metacritic, currently sitting at a score of 86. That's on 84 critic reviews. If we take a look at the review split, 79 positive and 5 mixed. And there are actually quite a few perfect scores, like hundreds. VGC says Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the Star Wars at its very best, a thrilling adventure with a stellar cast tied together with smart, expansive combat and huge new worlds to explore. Performance issues aside, it's easily some of the best Star Wars games ever made, and only makes us want more tales from the adventures of Cal Kestis and BD1. Now, on the other side of the review scales, we have We Got This Covered, giving it a 60, saying Jedi Survivor does so much right in continuing Cal Kestis' story, delivering the best lightsaber combat in a game to date, along with some huge environments to explore. Sadly, it's also launching with a bevy of technical issues and frame rate problems that will provide the worst experience for early adopters. Players deserve better. And I will agree with that. The fact that I've heard quite a bit around performance issues, and that's kind of across the board. It just depends on how much the reviewer wanted to look past that. Maybe they really like the story or the combat. Like, yeah, the frame rate, though, is kind of sketchy, but it's a really fun game otherwise. You're going to get those higher scores. But then people who are looking at that frame rate as a big deal, which, I mean, it is technically an action reaction-based game, so it should be a big deal, are going to dock it more points. And I'm just excited to see where they take the story for Cal Kestis, as from what I'm seeing with these reviews, he has a better character arc in this versus Fallen Order, as well as the supporting cast and all the different stances that you have with your lightsaber, with the combat, and then also the skill trees that go along with each stance. Seems like there's a lot of different ways to customize your character, and the best part, I thought about this a little bit as we're getting closer to it. Are they going to make you relearn all of your force powers? They'll do the Metroid Prime thing where something happens and you just forget. No, they're not trying to pull any of that. You just have all of your abilities from the start, so they have the game kick off, we'll say, in a hurry. So I'm excited, ready to pick this one up day one, and I think this is going to be a game that I'm going to be almost marathoning, because I want to get as much time in as I can ahead of the podcast Saturday night to discuss it. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Final Fantasy 16, as we had an announcement last night for a bundle, as well as a couple of other things to look forward to here. We can see this post up by Wario64. We have the Final Fantasy 16 bundle. It's announced through PlayStation Direct. Pre-orders start May 4th. And it's releasing on, well, June 22nd. And we can see the system there with the really nice artwork, by the way, on the front for Final Fantasy 16. It's not going to have a disc inside. It will just be a voucher code for the game, which is, I mean, that's what they've been doing basically this whole time. for the PS5. But if you're not necessarily in the market for a whole other PlayStation 5 system, check this out. They have a new controller, and I don't need a new controller, but that does look really good. So I like it's all blacked out, the nice like kind of gold and some like teal accents almost in there. And then they are going to be selling console covers for the shells on the PS5. This is something that I figured they would do eventually, it being Sony, as we went along, and I guess supply chains and stuff more or less normalized. And maybe this is something we can see consistently going forward as we have, yes, it's just a blacked out PlayStation 5 shells, but it has like the nice gold accent on the side of it, and I think it looks pretty clean. And obviously it's better than having to go out and buy an entire special edition system just because you're a big fan of that game and you want the nice themed console and all this. You can just buy the shell, which is something we figured would happen, we hoped would happen when the PS5 was first shown to have those removable side panels. Now, the only issue we have right now at the time of this recording is, as far as I can tell, the controller and the PS5 shell, it's just announced for Japan, so we'll have to keep an eye out to see if they are going to announce it for a worldwide release alongside of this bundle. Otherwise, you'll just have to import a controller or the shells, maybe through PlayAsia or Amazon. Sometimes you can order through that and it will still ship to you without any issues. But pretty cool to see that we are going to be having these special edition shells released. Again, certainly better than having to buy an entire other system, and it's what we were hoping for this entire way with those removable shells. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, Microsoft's Activision Blizzard deal has been blocked by the CMA. In your opinion, should Microsoft move on from the deal or continue to fight potentially for the next year or more? This was almost split down the middle, 47% saying they should move on now, start making other investments instead, maybe smaller studios, and then 53% say Microsoft should keep fighting. Activision Blizzard is worth it. Now, this is something that could be ongoing for a while, but I will admit Call of Duty is worth a lot. You know, being able to pair that with your service and your system, that's one of the best intellectual properties you can get, not only because of how strong it is, but also the frequency of release. I've seen people mention they should just go get Take-Two because of Grand Theft Auto. How often does Grand Theft Auto come out compared to how often does Call of Duty come out? And obviously the mobile side of things with King and Call of Duty Mobile, and there's a lot going on at Activision Blizzard that Microsoft sees and figures they can work into their own ecosystem and offering. So that's kind of why they targeted Activision Blizzard as opposed to some of the smaller publishers. And also, if they're going to take a swing, they might as well take a massive one. So I feel like they're going to be pretty stubborn about this, and the only thing that would get them off of it is if the EU blocked it and then the FTC followed up as well, and they all kind of got together essentially and made it pretty difficult for Microsoft to overcome and get this thing pushed through. But I guess we'll see again heading into next month what happens. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Ghost, says the ROG Ally seems cool, but pricing is my biggest concern. I bought the cheapest model Steam Deck and just updated the internal storage myself. Anything 800 plus would make it a niche product. I do agree with you on that one. I will point out that we have a slight update. If you look at Snoopy Tech here, who's been known to leak hardware and pricing in the past, they say Asus ROG Ally with the Z1 Extreme coming in at $700. It's important to note that Z1 Extreme because we would assume there is a base model here somewhere. So if they can get the ROG Ally base bare bones lowest model in at $500, even though it's $100 more than the lowest model Steam Deck, for 50% more performance and potentially a form factor that people would like more, I think that's easier to justify than, yes, $800 to $1,000. That would be a tough sell, but $500, even $550, that'd be a little easier. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it was the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom previews. What'd you think about some of the information that we got from it? And then also, what about Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, the CMA blocking? How do you think things are going to turn out here, especially as we head towards that EU decision? And then Star Wars Jedi Survivor with the reviews now out. Are you picking this one up? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.